Welcome to When Gen X Ruled the Multiplex, the films that shaped the MTV generation. I'm kicking off 2022 and the final 13 episodes of this series with a look at one of the biggest hits of the 80s, 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Directed by Steven Spielberg, Raiders of the Lost Ark sprang from a story idea by George Lucas, who was fascinated by the pulpy, action-packed Republic Pictures adventure serials from the 1930s and 40s, and who wanted to capture that spirit in a big, full-length feature. Lucas teamed up with Philip Kaufman, who'd go on to write and direct such acclaimed films as The Right Stuff and Henry and June, and came up with a story idea, which was later adapted into a screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan, who would co-write The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and who would write and direct the baby boomer classic, The Big Chill. Made for around $20 million, Raiders of the Lost Ark won 5 Academy Awards, launched a far-reaching film franchise, and quickly became one of the most popular and beloved films of all time. Somewhere in South America in 1936, a bullwhip-wielding archaeologist named Indiana Jones charges through the jungle. He's accompanied by a guide, Satipo, who is played by Alfred Molina in his film debut. Molina has since been acclaimed for his performances in films like Frida and Chocolat, and for playing Doc Ock in a couple of films about Spider-Man. Satipo accompanies Indy into a cavernous temple where they're plagued by deadly traps before at last reaching their prize, a shiny golden idol. Satipo steals the idol for himself and abandons Indy, and is promptly killed in a trap. Indy avoids many perils and makes it out of the temple, only to find himself at the mercy of his nemesis, French archaeologist René Belloc, who is aided by a native tribe called the Hovitos. Belloc is played by Paul Freeman, who was Reverend Shooter in Hot Fuzz. Belloc takes the idol, and the Hovitos chase Indy through the jungle. Indy boards a seaplane and flies to safety, and we hear John Williams' very famous and very rousing Indiana Jones theme play for the first time. Indiana Jones is, of course, played by Harrison Ford. Tom Selleck was originally cast in the role, but couldn't accept it due to his contractual duties on Magnum P.I. Lucas had worked with Harrison Ford before on both Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, and when Selleck backed out, Lucas called on Ford to step in, thus presenting him with his second iconic role in a second iconic film franchise. If you had to pick one actor to serve as the face of 80s cinema, Harrison Ford would be a pretty solid choice. In his day job as a mild-mannered college professor, Indy is visited by his friend Marcus Brody, who is played by Denholm Elliott, known for films like Trading Places and A Room with a View. Marcus is a museum curator who directly purchases the various historically significant artifacts Indy swipes from various exotic locales to add to his museum's collection. I'm not 100% certain that's an accurate representation of the typical museum curator-archaeologist working relationship, but I am neither an archaeologist nor a museum curator, so I'm not going to think too closely about it. Indy and Marcus meet with a pair of Army intelligence agents. One is played by Don Fellows, and the other is played by William Hootkins, whom we have already seen playing the corrupt police lieutenant Eckhart in Tim Burton's Batman, and who is also X-Wing pilot Red 6 in Star Wars. The intelligence agents recently intercepted a message from the Nazis, who have been searching outside Cairo for the lost city of Tanis, home of the Well of Souls, the possible resting place for the biblical Ark of the Covenant. To find the Well of Souls, the Nazis need to get their sinister hands on the headpiece of the Staff of Ra, which is in the possession of one of Indy's old colleagues, Professor Ravenwood. The US Army would like Indy to find the Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis, so Indy heads to Nepal in search of Professor Ravenwood. He's trailed by a Gestapo agent named Arnold Tote, played by Ronald Lacey, whom we have seen playing the US President in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. In a bar, Indy encounters Professor Ravenwood's tough-as-nails daughter, Marion. Marion, who is played by Animal House's Karen Allen, is fresh from slaughtering the competition in a no-holds-barred drinking contest. Professor Ravenwood, it turns out, is dead. It also turns out that Indy and Marion were once romantically linked, and she is holding a deep grudge about the way the relationship ended. By the way, and this is absolutely true, in an early brainstorming session, George Lucas put forth the idea that Indy and Marion were romantically linked when he was a grown-ass adult and she was 11. And Steven Spielberg very wisely said, "Ooh, no, let's not do that." Marion punches Indy in the face and kicks him out. The bar is then raided by vicious Nazis, led by Tote, who is also looking for the headpiece. Indy comes to her rescue, there's a big brawl, Marion and Indy escape with the headpiece, and the bar goes up in flames. Tote ends up with a beautiful impression of the headpiece burned into his palm, which turns out to be pretty useful to the Nazis. Marion and Indy fly to Cairo, where they meet Indy's friend Sala, who is played by John Rhys Davies, Gimli in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Sala tells Indy the Nazis are working with Belloc to find the Well of Souls. A cute little monkey takes a liking to Marion, though the monkey is actually a Nazi spy who is feeding information about Indy's movements to the Germans. The Nazis and some hired locals ambush Indy and Marion in a marketplace. Fisticuffs ensue. Marion is captured and ostensibly killed in a truck explosion. At Sala's home, a spy sneaks in and poisons Indy's food, but only the Nazi monkey dies. Indy and Sala snoop near Belloc's dig site. Indy slips into a buried temple and uses the headpiece to determine the exact location of the Well of Souls. Indy also finds Marion, who is Belloc's captive. Indy decides not to rescue her just then, so the Nazis won't know he's on the dig site, which is sort of understandable under the circumstances, and also sort of a dick move. An amorous Belloc tries to put the moves on a captive Marion. After casually getting Belloc stinking drunk, Marion almost pulls off a cool escape, but is captured by Tote. At the dig site, Indy finds the Well of Souls, which is a pit filled with the only thing that can strike fear in his otherwise courageous heart: snakes. Indy fights down his phobia long enough to find the Ark, but Belloc and the Nazis swipe it out from under his nose. They abandon Indy and Marion to their apparent deaths among the snakes. Indy and Marion escape from the pit, a little worse for wear, and then Indy hijacks a truck carrying the Ark after what turns out to be a ridiculously long chase scene involving Indy commandeering multiple forms of transportation. Raiders of the Lost Ark has many superb and extremely well-paced action scenes. That whole opening sequence in the South American jungle is widely held up as the action-adventure film gold standard, and with good reason. But holy hell, this particular chase scene, while beautifully filmed and impeccably choreographed, lasts for 1,000,000 years. Marion and Indy bid Sala farewell and board a London-bound steamer. The steamer is captained by a man named Katanga, played by George Harris, who is Kingsley Shacklebolt in the Harry Potter films. On board, Marion and Indy briefly get romantic, and then the ship is raided by Nazis. Despite Katanga's best attempts to protect Marion, the Nazis kidnap her and steal the Ark. Indy secretly stows away on their boat, and they sail off to a secret island base where the Nazis plan to examine the Ark before delivering it to Berlin. On the island, Indy tries to rescue Marion and steal back the Ark, but is forced to surrender to the Nazis. With Indy and Marion serving as his captive audience, Belloc supervises the opening of the Ark. Radiant light and spectral creatures pour out of it. Indy and Marion shut their eyes as Belloc, Tote, and the rest of the Nazis are either blasted to bits, or burst into flames, or have their faces melted off by the power of the Ark. In the end, only Marion and Indy remain. In Washington, the Army intelligence guys tell Indy and Marcus that the Ark is now in the possession of the US government, in a safe yet undisclosed location. Marion takes a grumpy Indy out for a drink, while the Ark is packed up in a crate and stored in an anonymous warehouse along with thousands of similar crates. Raiders of the Lost Ark was followed by 3 sequels, all of which starred Harrison Ford: 1984's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, 1989's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and after a gap of close to 2 decades, 2008's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. An as-yet untitled 5th film in the series is set for a 2023 release. There was also a 1992 TV prequel series, The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which was followed by a series of made-for-TV films. While all of these various Indiana Jones-related projects have had their share of critical detractors, they've all been pretty popular with audiences, even the one where Indy survives the detonation of an atom bomb by hiding in a refrigerator. However, the original film is pretty universally regarded as the creme de la creme of the franchise, and of the entire action-adventure film genre. Which makes sense, because it's a delightful film. It's well-paced, with great action sequences, and a nice balance of humor and heft, and it features solid and likable performances across the board. Indiana Jones is a very human character, which is a big part of his considerable appeal. He's strong and smart and possesses a unique skill set, which makes him particularly handy in a tough spot, but he's not invincible, and when he gets hurt, viewers feel his pain. Karen Allen's tough practical Marion is a perfect romantic foil for Indy, and his various allies, like Sala and Marcus and Katanga, are all good and interesting characters. The villains are properly dastardly, up to and including that awful little Nazi monkey, and the larger-than-life clashes between the good guys and the bad guys in various exotic spots around the globe turn the film into a rousing adventure. Raiders of the Lost Ark has had a strong influence on pop culture, influencing everything from The Goonies, to Romancing the Stone, to the splendidly entertaining Mummy franchise, to Tomb Raider, to Duran Duran's Hungry Like the Wolf video, and much more. When I looked at Top Gun a while back, I mentioned how the success of that film drove up Navy recruitment numbers, thanks to viewers who thought it made being a fighter pilot look like a pretty sexy career choice. Raiders of the Lost Ark had that same effect. It lured viewers to the field of archaeology, even though experts generally do not regard the film as an especially realistic look at the life of a typical archaeologist. I know, that surprised me too. Raiders of the Lost Ark is now such a major part of our Gen X pop culture landscape that it's almost hard to remember that it wasn't expected to be a big hit, and thus was released with relatively little fanfare. It opened decently well at the top position of the box office, but even still, at first it didn't seem like it was likely to break many records. But it quickly built up a great deal of goodwill from both critics and viewers, many of whom saw it many times and recommended it to their friends. It ended up remaining in theaters for a year and staying in the box office top 10 for 40 weeks. It ultimately became the biggest hit of 1981, and it remains a film that a healthy percentage of us Gen Xers regard as a key part of our formative years. Next time, we'll have the time of our lives when I look at 1987's Dirty Dancing. Thank you for hanging in there with me, and I'll see you then.